name is Tracy Whitfield, and today I'll be doing a bracelet tutorial for the Potomac Bead Company. This is the vintage Elegance bracelet, and this bracelet is made using the Potomac crystal Chatons in the SS24 size. The Chatons are set into the 2-hole spacer bezels, and I'll show you in a moment how to set the Chaton in the spacer bezel. I've already have some made up right here, and this is what they'll look like. The color of the Chatons that I'm going to be using for our project today is the black diamond, and then I'll be using the antique silver 2-hole spacer bezels. In addition to the Chatons and the spacer bezels, we're going to need some seed beads. We're going to need some 8/0 seed beads, and I'll be using the Miyuki Duracoat Galvanized light pewter. And we'll need some 11/0 seed beads, and I'll be using the Miyuki Duracoat Galvanized silver color. We'll need some 2x3mm Rondelles, and I'm using the Potomac crystal Rondelles, and I believe this is the hematite color. On the ends of our bracelet, we have wire protectors. And so we're going to need some wire protectors for our project today. We're going to need some jump rings to connect our bracelet to a clasp, and I'll be using a 2-strand tube clasp for today's project. In addition to those materials, we're going to need some beading thread, and I'm going to use the Wildfire .006 in the black color. We'll need a beading needle, and I'll be using a size 12 beading needle. We'll need some E6000 glue to set our Chaton into our spacer bezel. We'll need some tools. We'll need something to cut our thread. I'll be using my thread zap to cut and burn down the ends of my thread. And we're going to need some flat nose pliers to connect our jump rings. Okay, so let me show you how to place your Chaton into your spacer bezel. So I'm going to use a toothpick. So I'll place a dab of glue onto my toothpick, and then I'm going to place that glue into the spacer bezel. I'll then place my Chaton into the bezel, and I'm going to twirl it with my finger. And then I'll use the other end of the toothpick to clean up any excess glue from around the edge. Now we want to let that sit and cure. I let mine sit, I already have some made up, and I let these sit overnight to be ready for the project today. Okay, so let's get all of our supplies and our Chaton set into our spacer bezels, and we'll get started on our project. Okay, let's add a comfortable length of beading thread to our needle, and I have a couple of yards added. And then add a stop bead to our thread, leaving about an 8-inch tail. To start, we want to pick up one of our spacer bezels by going through one of the holes and let that drop down to our stop bead. From here, we'll pick up 3 11/0 seed beads, 1 8/0 seed bead, and 3 more 11/0 seed beads. Let those beads drop down, and then we'll sew through the other hole of our spacer bezel. And this is what you'll have. Again, we're going to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads, one 8/0 seed bead and 3 11/0 seed beads. I'll let those beads drop down. And we're going to come back through this first hole on our spacer bezel. And this is what you'll have with the seed beads on the sides of the bezel. Now what we want to do is we want to go around and reinforce this, making sure that we go through each seed bead and pull tight. Okay, I've gone around the bezel again, reinforcing those beads. I'm actually going to come back up this side of seed beads to exit the top hole of the bezel. And we'll go through the bezel as well, through the hole of the bezel as well, and we'll pull tight and make sure our stop bead is still in place. Okay, here we're going to pick up 1 11/0, 1 2x3 millimeter rondelle, and 1 11/0, and we're going to get another spacer bezel. We'll let our beads drop down, and we're going to sew through one of the holes on the next spacer bezel. And that's what you'll have. We'll pick up 1 11/0 seed bead, 1 2x3 millimeter rondelle, 1 11/0 seed bead. And now we're going to come through, we'll let these beads drop down, and now we're going to come through, I'm going to call this the top hole of the previous bezel. So we're going to sew through that top hole of the previous bezel. And now we've connected these two spacer bezels. We're going to go back and reinforce this connection. So I'm going to turn my beadwork, making sure we want to pull tight and make sure we go through each of the beads. And it's going to be a little flimsy initially when you get started, but that won't be all the way down your bracelet. So I'm going to go down through this side and back up the other side one more time. So we're going to come up this side of the connection and then go through this bottom hole of this spacer bezel. Okay, and that's what we'll have. Okay, now we want to add seed beads around this spacer bezel. So we'll pick up 3 11/0 seed beads. One 8/0 seed bead and 3 11/0 seed beads. And we'll go through the other hole, or the top hole of this spacer bezel. Again, 3 11/0 seed beads, 1 8/0 seed bead, 3 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to let those beads drop down. We're going to come back through the bottom hole of this spacer bezel we're now working with. Just go through the hole of the spacer bezel. Don't go through the seed bead that's sitting right next to it. And that is what you'll have. And we are going to again reinforce these beads all the way around, making sure that we don't miss going through any of the beads. And pull tight. Okay, now that we've gone around and through those beads again, we're going to come up this side of the bezel by going through these beads one more time. And we'll exit from that top hole of that spacer bezel. Okay, now we're ready to add a connection to our next spacer bezel. So we'll pick up an 11/0, 2 by 3 millimeter rondelle, and an 11/0. We're going to grab our next spacer bezel, and we're going to go through one of the holes. Pick up an 11/0, a 2 by 3 millimeter rondelle, and 11/0, and we're going to come back through the spacer bezel hole. We're only going through the spacer bezel hole. We're not going to go through any of the seed beads on the side. And that is your connection to your next spacer bezel. So again, we're going to go around these beads to reinforce, and then we'll exit from the spacer bezel. Okay, and pull tight as you're reinforcing this connection. I'm going to exit from the, I'll call it the bottom hole of this last spacer bezel we added. And now we're ready to add the beads along the sides of this bezel. So you'll continue adding the seed beads along the sides of the bezel, reinforcing that, and then adding your connection with your seed beads and your 2x3mm rondelles, and then reinforcing that. For my bracelet that I'm making today, I will have, for the length of the bracelet, I am going to have approximately 9 spacer bezels, but you'll add as many as you need for the length of bracelet that you're going to be making. Okay, so now that we have the length of our bracelet, again, I have 9 of the spacer bezels for my bracelet, and I didn't mention this before, but you want to start with a spacer bezel and end the length of your bracelet with a spacer bezel. So now we'll want to add on one of our wire protectors. So this is what the end of our bracelet will look like. Now you can just add a loop to connect your jump ring to if you want, but I'll show you how to add on a wire protector. So right now I'm exiting from that the top hole of the last spacer bezel that we added, and we'll be picking up 3 11/0 seed beads, and then we'll go up one side of our wire protector, we'll come down the other side of the wire protector, making sure our thread sits in the channel. We'll pick up 3 11/0 seed beads. I'll let that drop down, and then we're going to go through that top hole of the spacer bezel again. Now I'm going to come down around this side of the spacer bezel by going through these seed beads. I'm going to come around and go through the bottom hole of that spacer bezel. We're going to come up on this side of the spacer bezel by coming through these seed beads here. And we're going to exit from the last seed bead on that side. And now we're going to go back up and around our loop to reinforce. So we're not going through the whole of the spacer bezel. We're going to exit from that last seed bead on this side and come up through the 3 seed beads and our wire protector. Go around our wire protector and down through the next 3 seed beads, making sure your thread sits in that channel. And now we want to come back down through the seed beads on this side. We're only going to come back through those first 3 seed beads and then the 8/0 seed bead. So now we'll get ready to add in the other side of our bracelet. Okay, so with our thread exiting from this 8/0 seed bead right here, we're actually going to connect the next spacer bezel to the side of this one. So when we connect our spacer bezels, they'll be sharing the 8/0 seed bead that's in between them. So here we want to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads. And we're actually going to go through one of the holes of the next spacer bezel that we want to add. We're going to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads, 1 8/0 seed bead, and 3 11/0 seed beads. Let those beads drop down. Now we're going to come up the side of the spacer bezel that we're adding. Now we're just going to add on 3 11/0 seed beads. Let those beads drop down, and we're going to go through that 8/0 seed bead again that is connecting the two bezels. Oops, I didn't go through it. Okay. And that is what you'll have. What we're also going to do is we're going to add on our loop with our wire protector. So we'll go down through the 3 seed beads that's on the side of our latest bezel. We're going to come up the side of the bezel, pulling tight. The 3 seed beads, the 8/0, and then the 3 11/0 seed beads following that. And then go through the whole of the spacer bezel. Pull tight. And go through your spacer bezel. And now we'll pick up 3 11/0 seed beads. We're going to go through our wire protector. And let those drop down. We're going to come around the wire protector and we'll add 3 more 11/0 seed beads. Let those beads drop down. We're going to come through the top hole of our bezel, our spacer bezel. So go through that top hole. And this is what you'll have. I'm going to come around this bezel again and then reinforce our loop. So go down through the three 11/0 seed beads. Go through our joining 8/0. Through the next three 11/0 seed beads around this bezel, spacer bezel. Go through the whole of the spacer bezel. Come back around the seed beads on this side of the bezel. And exit out of that the last seed bead on this side. Now we want to go up and reinforce our loop. So go up through the three seed beads and then through our wire protector again. Down, around and down the other side. Making sure our thread sits in that channel. And down the three seed beads on that side of our loop. And then we're going to come down the three seed beads on the side of this bezel. Go through the three seed beads. We'll go through our joining 8/0 again. And then we'll go through the next three seed beads on the side of this bezel. And now you have your two loops and the ends complete. So now we're going to go through this whole of the spacer bezel and begin to add our connection to add more. I'm going to turn mine this way. Okay, so now we want to add our connection like we did on this side. And to do that, we'll just add our an 11/0 seed bead, our 2x3 millimeter rondelle, and 11/0 seed bead. We're going to get another spacer bezel. We're going to go through the whole of the spacer bezel. We're going to get an 11/0, 2x3 millimeter rondelle, and then another 11/0. And we're going to come back through the previous spacer bezel. And we'll pull tight. We're going to reinforce this connection. So go up one side of the connection, go through your spacer bezel, And down the other side. Go through the previous spacer bezel and back up this side. And then we're going to come through this bottom hole of this spacer bezel. Alright, so now we want to add the seed beads around the side of the spacer bezel here. We're going to pick up 3 11/0 seed beads, and we're going to go through the 8/0 seed bead that's sitting right next to the spacer bezel we're working on now. So this is going to be our joining 8/0 seed bead. We'll go through that 8/0 seed bead. And we'll pick up 3 11/0 seed beads. And then we'll come through the top hole of the spacer bezel that we're working on now. Go through the top hole of that spacer bezel. Now we're going to add the seed beads along the side, this side of the spacer bezel. So we'll get 3 11/0s, 1 8/0 seed bead, and 3 11/0s. Let those beads drop down. Come back through what I'm going to call the bottom hole of this spacer bezel and pull tight. And that's what you'll have. We want to go through and reinforce these beads like we have been doing. So go around, go up, go up this side through the top hole of that spacer bezel. We're going to come down this side, making sure we go through each of those seed beads. Then we're going to go through the hole of the spacer bezel. And pull tight. Now we're going to come back up this side of the spacer bezel. So we're basically doing right angle weave. I'm doing it with 1 needle. If you would like, you can try this project with 2 needles. I usually like working with 2 needles, but this one I decided to do with 1 needle. So we're coming up this side. And we're going to come through the top hole of the spacer bezel, and then we're now ready to add our next connection with our 11/0s and our rondelle beads. So continue adding your remaining spacer bezels with the Chatons set in them on this side of the bracelet. Remember, when you are adding your spacer bezels now, that you're connecting to this middle 8/0 from the previous from this previous row. Okay. So we've completed adding our spacer bezels on this side of the bracelet, and now we're ready to finish off this end of the bracelet. I showed you how to add the wire protectors on this end, so I'm just going to briefly tell you what to do on this side. I'm not going to actually go through it. So basically, I'm coming out of on this side of the bracelet, I'm coming out of the spacer bezel. We would add our 3 11/0 seed beads, our wire protector, and then 3 more 11/0 seed beads, and then we'll go, go around and reinforce that. And then we would actually end this thread. For this side, since we have our tail thread, and this is the reason why I mentioned that we should add a little bit of extra length after the stop bead. We're going to take that stop bead off, add our needle to the thread, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to add the 3 11/0 seed beads, your wire protector, 3 more 11/0 seed beads, and then come back down through your spacer bezel and reinforce that. So go ahead and finish off this end of the bracelet, and then I'll show you how to connect it to your clasp. So now that we have both sides of our bracelet completed, we're going to use our jump rings to attach the clasp. I've already gone ahead and attached one side of our bracelet to the clasp, and I'll do the other side. So we'll take our jump ring and get our flat nose pliers. We're going to go through the loop on our clasp, and then we'll add the end of our bracelet onto the jump ring, and then we'll close our jump ring. So do that to this for this last jump ring. And now our bracelet is done. So this is what it looks like when it's on.